Hi, this is Gary. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make your own potting mix. The reason you'd want to make your own potting mix is it's cheaper. Right now, if you go up there and buy a bag of Miracle Grow or one of the others, they're $15, $20 a bag for 2 cubic feet. It's also going to last longer. Most of your stuff that you buy is made to last for just a couple of months or 6 months. If you want to go something like with these with tomatoes, you're probably okay, but with the fig trees or peach tree or something like that that's in a container, you want something that lasts longer. When you go to the store, you're going to see two things. You have one thing that says potting mix and one that says potting soil. Potting mix is kind of what you want. It doesn't have any soil in it. The potting soil usually does. The first thing you learn in Horticulture 101 is you do not ever put soil in a container. It doesn't drain well, it compacts bad, but it's cheap. So they put the dirt in there to make it cheap. So you look at the potting mix, it's expensive, and you think, well, I want to save money, so you may try to go to potting soil. The only advantage potting soil would have is it would add some weight to it, so it wouldn't blow over as easy because your potting mix is going to be a little bit lighter. But other than that, you really shouldn't be putting soil into your containers. Now there's usually two types of DIY potting mixes if you go in there and look at it. One of them is called a gritty mix. It uses True Face or True Face and granite, I think Perlite. It's very heavy, it's very well drained. It drains soil real well. In fact, if you are a person that waters a lot and you have an indoor plant or something of that nature, it would be what you want to go with if you can find the ingredients. I never could find all the ingredients for it. It's also very heavy. It also drains very well, as I said earlier, which means you have to water a lot. I know one person said, well, if you have it outside on summer, you may have to water 2 or 3 times a day, but you do what's best for the plant. Now I was going, but I work for a living, I can't water them 2 or 3 times a day, plus I might get sick or may want to go on vacation. So I never really explored the gritty mix. It is a good mix, especially if you're up north, because you won't hold too much water, so your roots won't rot on you as bad. The kind that I use is what they call 5-1-1 mix, and that's 5 part peat, pine bark mulch, and that's this here. You have to probably do that. And it's the finer ground. You don't want the pine bark mulch that's in the big clumps, the big aggregates or whatever. You want it to be kind of loose. You want, this size. You don't want it to be real big because it will drain too well. But use 5 parts pine bark mulch, 1 part perlite, and then 1 part peat moss. So you'll take these and you'll mix them together, and the parts are by volume. So however much you want to make, you make the whatever pot that you use. If you want to use a 1-gallon pot or a 3-gallon pot or a 5-gallon pot, then you just use five of those pots because it's by volume. The way I usually do it, you're going to put 2 of these in here, or 3 of these in here first off. And then you're going to put the perlite in there. And you're going to put your peat moss. And then you put your others in there. Don't breathe the stuff in. That just makes it easier to breathe. I mean, easier to mix. And then you'll mix it all up. And you have some fine looking pine bark mulch like that. Now, one thing I'm going to say, 5-1-1 mix is what everybody advertises, and it's what they go by. That's a base. You can change it, or you may say I want to use 6 or 7 parts. You may say I want to have more water retention, so you're going to use less pine bark mulch. But it does give you, a good starting point. You just try not to deviate too far from it. It does not have any type of fertilization to it. There's no nutrients in this. Anything that you get from pine bark mulch is probably going to be washed out when you water, so you're going to have to amend it. You want to use a complete fertilizer. Usually organics don't have the complete, plus organics don't work real good in a pot or in a container anyway, just because it's not natural. You can't keep the bacteria and the mycorrhiza and all these other things going. They tend to boom and bust. It just doesn't work as well. Plus it takes, sometimes like compost, it may take 5 years for it to completely break down. So I don't use organics in it. I do use organics some in the garden. Compost is a great thing to put in a raised bed. It's a great thing to put in ground garden. It just doesn't work real well in a container. Now, the other thing sometimes people do is I add lime to it. This mix here will probably be somewhere around 5 0.5, 50, something like that. Works really great if you're trying to grow blueberries. I used to add the lime each time, and you add a handful of lime for every 5 gallons of mix, because it's real scientific, but you know, that's close enough. And what you don't want to do is just get your lime, you get pH too high. What I found out, if you're using tap water or well water, your pH is going to keep moving up over time. So I usually don't add any, but if you're going to try to grow something like spinach that likes a high pH or higher pH, it's not going to grow in this stuff. It's going to stunt out on you. So if you get something that's needs a higher pH, you probably want to add the lime. If you're going to add something like tomatoes that you need the calcium, then that's a good way to get some calcium into it, and you're not going to raise it that much over you know, for just that 1 year. Now, first thing you're going to say is, I can't find such and such. So here's the substitutes. The 511 to me is probably the best with the pine bark mulch, the perlite, and the peat moss, but sometimes you can't find one of those, especially with all the stuff we've been going through the last couple of years. First substitute for pine bark, and a lot of areas don't have the pine bark, you can go with like hardwood mulch. It's just going to break down. It's going to break down faster. One that I would be interested in, I know in Central Texas they got a lot of cedar bark or cedar mulch. It's got the right kind of consistency. The only thing that kind of scares me on it is it does have a lot of other chemicals in it naturally. I know whenever if you ever do a prescribed burn, we used to do prescribed burns, and if you'd be 200 feet away from the flames, and a cedar tree will burst up into flames because it has what we used to always call turpentine, but it's not probably actually turpentine. But it would actually, that stuff is in it, so I don't know how it reacts. If anybody's tried it and it's worked, let me know in the comments. I would be interested in it. I've always wanted to try it, but usually whenever I was around it, had suitcases in the back, so I didn't have enough room to put in pine bark in the back. But that might work, or any other type of bark. I wouldn't use anything that's been colored. You don't want to use any of the plastic or rubber mulch or any of that stuff. You want something that is organic, that is carbon-based. For perlite, they've actually got some good, you know, substitutes for it. One thing, in Central Texas, you got what they call expanded shell, and the expanded shell is good. It both causes it to have good circular air in it, because it won't completely, if you submerge it in water, it will still have some air bubbles and air in it, so you can't put too much water in it. The other thing that it does, you know, it aerates the soil basically, and the other thing that it does is also hold in some moisture. It also holds a little bit more weight because it's a little bit heavier. I just can't find it around here. I would use that, but it also keeps that stuff from clumping up as bad. The other thing that you can do is there's a stuff called Optisorb. It's OPITSORB, oil absorbent. Now this comes from O'Reilly's, and bear with me, all it is coarse ground diatomaceous earth. And a lot of people, if you're in gardening, you know what diatomaceous earth is. You don't want the fine stuff, but that Optisorb is a coarse. You can use it. It also holds a lot of water, and it also provides aeration, so it would be another good substitute. It's just a little bit higher. For a 25-pound bag, I think right now it's running about $20, $19.99, so it's more expensive than what your perlite is. Perlite right now, for this, let me show it, for this 4 cubic feet bag, locally I can get it for $29.99. I think Amazon has it on for $39.99 because they got to ship it to you. So it's, you know, it's cheap. It's just you have to buy a lot of it at one time if you do it that way. For the peat moss, for peat moss, some people don't like growing peat moss, so they want to go with coconut coir. Coconut coir does not work very well. It compacts really bad. It also sometimes has a lot of salt in it. But one thing you could do is go with some type of store-bought compost, or compost that has been heat treated. You really don't want to put the homemade compost in, and I'll get to that here in just, well, that's something that you could substitute for. Or you could just leave it out. This stuff here is probably fine enough that I have grown stuff in just the perlite and the pine bark mulch, because you're looking for the fines. So, you know, that might work for you. But I don't really like putting homemade compost in, because if you're making homemade compost, first off, if you're using any of the manures, you could get some type of diseases, such as your Salmonella, E. coli diseases for us. Or if you got it outside and you're putting stuff in it, it could give, diseases, for the vermiculite wilt or one of those other type of wilts. It's not vermiculite wilt, anyway. One of the wilts, different stuff can be stored in it, so you bring that into your pots, plus you bring in weed seeds and things of that nature. If you do a good job of composting, which almost no one does, probably 99% of the people that do compost just can't get it right because it's complicated. You have to have almost 4x4 deal of compost, and you have to get that heat generated. It's supposed to be 140 degrees for like 2 weeks. You have to be stirring it about every week or so you can kill all those pathogens. If you don't, you could be adding pathogens to your soil. Another thing you don't want to put in there, of course, is soil. Rocks. Now rocks, if you use it just for weight in the bottom, because that's all it's going to give you is weight, would be okay. It's not going to help in drainage whatsoever. They've proven over and over again, you put rocks in the bottom of a container, it does not improve the drainage, because the water will have a perched water table within that column. It won't keep draining. It will stop, because water doesn't like going from a fine textured substance to a coarse textured substance. So, like I say, coconut coir doesn't work well either. Sand doesn't really help. The only thing sand will do for you is it'll give you weight. It won't. The other thing that the peat moss would do, it will also hang on to the nutrients that you put into the soil. It won't just let it flush out. Sand doesn't hold any nutrients. It doesn't hold any water. It doesn't improve aeration. It just gives you weight. So to sum it up, the best way to do it is do 5 parts of peat moss, 5 parts of pine bark, 1 part peat moss, and 1 part perlite. And if you have any questions, comments, especially if you have any comments on the cedar bark mulch, I'm always curious about that. So if you tried that and it's worked, let me know. If it didn't work, let me know. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, push like and subscribe. Thank you.